Hello, this is Dr. Mewborn, and this is Religion in the Public Square. We are looking at the topic of the Constitution of the United States, and we're in part 3 of that study. Let's go ahead and get started in our study today. One of the questions I want to begin with today is what is going on in Congress? And I think sometimes this is what we think. Meanwhile, in Congress, this is what's happening. It's just a constant playing around. And then sometimes we think this is what it is, right? It's actually dodging. This is President Bush, George W. Bush. He's actually dodging a shoe from somebody that's really apparently against him in every single way. And so this is kind of what we think that's going on. But I hope that in this part 3, you'll get a better understanding of what's really going on in the Congress. You've seen this before, this slide before, but it's the articles of the Constitution. We have the legislative branch, the executive branch, the judicial branch, relations among states, the amendment process, national debts, national supremacy, oaths of office, and then number 7, requirements for ratification. So there's 7 articles of the Constitution, and of course there's amendments after that we'll talk about as well. But this is kind of what we're looking at as we're preparing for the midterm exam. We've already looked at Article 1, the legislative branch, which just simply says the principal mission of the legislative body is to make laws. 2 different chambers, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Congress is a legislative body that holds the power to draft and pass legislation, borrow money for the nation, declare war, and raise the military. It also has the power to check and balance the other 2 federal branches. And we looked at this article last time, but now what we're going to do is look into Article 2 through 7. And as we see in Article 2, the executive branch manages the day-to-day operations of government through various federal departments and agencies. At the head of this branch is the nationally elected President of the United States, and that is President Donald Trump. And then it goes on to say the President swears an oath to faithfully execute the responsibilities as President and preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, making treaties with other nations, appointing federal judges, department heads, and ambassadors, and determining how to best run the country and run military operations. And this is kind of the job of the President. As we continue on looking at Article 2, we look at one of the greatest presidents, Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was a president during a very difficult time in America. He was a president that was actually elected in 4 different terms, which is amazing because no other president in the history of the U.S. has been elected for more than 2 terms, but he was elected for 4 terms because of his great leadership and, of course, during the time of war in World War II. And so this is a great picture, a symbol of a great leader and a great man that was leading the country during a difficult time. Now, one of the things I wanted to look at was the roles, or actually the titles of the president. You can kind of see these here. The Chief of State, he's also called the Chief Executive, the Chief Administrator, Chief Diplomat, Commander-in-Chief, Chief Legislator, Party Chief, and also he's called Chief Citizen. And so there's really 7 to 8 different names for him, but he is the main head of our nation, and so he's the chief. And so that's kind of why we think so highly, of course, of the position. But he is the person who is giving us he's not just a figurehead, as maybe the Queen or the King of England or somebody like that would be, but he is more of a person who is the spearhead of this great nation that we have. And so he is a servant to us. He is the one who is taking care of so many things. And so that's what Article 2 is a lot about. Now in that, we looked at the electoral votes, and we've already talked about this somewhat. There's 438 representatives, there's 100 senators, and what they do is they make up the electoral college upon which we actually get our president from. And so this is kind of a neat thing. Each state has a population, and that population has an elector. Depending on that population. And so California on the left has 55 electors, and that just is because of their population. It's so large. But then if you look at Nevada right next to it with 6, that's not very many. It's because they have a lot less population there. And so that's how that is based. And so our nation, we elect a president based on electors and electoral college instead of a popular vote. And so that's kind of what we've talked about already. But just dealing with Article 2, looking at this branch, it's good to know those types of things again. I wanted to show this slide again. This is a great slide when looking at how long somebody can serve for, also their minimum age, things like that. It's very important to look at these things. And what we see here is president has a term of 4 years. His has to be a minimum age of 35 and residency 14 years in the U.S. and has to be a natural born citizen. And we've already talked about that a little bit before. But these are types of things that are very important when looking at who this person is and how they get elected to office. One of the things I want to show you is, can you imagine Hillary Clinton as the vice president during President Trump's presidency? One of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is because our country, the rule used to be that the vice president was the person who was the runner-up when it came to who was voted into office. And so if President Trump gets the majority of electoral votes, he's in as president. But the person that is second or the runner-up to him would be the vice president. And so can you imagine, that's why I asked this question, that's the way it used to be. But those rules changed, and now the president or somebody running for president actually has a running mate that they run together. And so the vice president is Mike Pence, and that was a choice that Donald Trump actually made there. And so that is, I just thought that was a pretty interesting thought here when we look at this. Now, as we go further on, I wanted to show you a picture of Donald Trump with some money, because the executive branch, the chief executive, has a lot of money coming in. And he has $400,000 in the president's annual salary according to the Title III of the U.S. Code, $50,000 annual expense account, $100,000 non-taxable travel account, $19,000 for entertainment. Like most employees, the president receives benefits in addition to a salary. And so if you add all those numbers up, you have a pretty amazing salary that he receives. Now, it has been said that he did not receive or did not take a salary because he is a billionaire. And so as president, he didn't take a salary. So I don't really know all the facts on that, but that's something that definitely I've read, and just not sure 100% if all that's true. But I just wanted to share that. But presidents, this is what a president would make. And so we're looking upwards to $500,000 a year from the government. And so pretty amazing when you look at all those types of things, right? As we go on Article 3, the judicial branch, this article outlines the powers of the federal court system, determines that the court of last resort is the U.S. Supreme Court, and that the U.S. Congress has the power to determine the size and scope of those courts below it. All judges are appointed for life, except for bad behavior. Judges facing charges will be tried and judged by a jury of their peers. Now, I wanted to show you this, and I don't know why it's a little fuzzy, but why it came that way. But anyways, I want you to see this. This is how our court system actually works. Supreme Court, highest court in the federal system. 9 justices meeting in Washington, D.C. Appeals jurisdiction through certiorari process. Limited original jurisdiction over some cases. Then there's the courts of appeal. Intermediate level in the federal system. 12 regional circuit courts, including D.C. Circuit. No original jurisdiction, strictly appellate. And then they have the district courts, lowest level in the federal system, 94 judicial districts in 50 states and territories. No appellate jurisdiction, original jurisdiction over most cases. And so this is kind of how the Supreme Court or federal system is laid out there. Here's just a different slide of it. U.S. Supreme Court, 1 court. U.S. Courts of Appeals, 13 courts. You see that there. U.S. District Courts, 94 districts, each with a bankruptcy court, plus U.S. Court of International Trade, U.S. Court of Federal Claims. And so that's kind of how that's laid out. Here is a great picture of the Supreme Court. And if you ever get a chance to go there, please go there. It is a special, special place. The Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction in all cases involving ambassadors, ministers, consuls, and in all cases in which a state is party. And so this is the highest court in the land. A very, very special place that you need to visit if you get the chance. Article 4, relations among states, outlines the relationship between the states and the federal government. The federal government guarantees a Republican form of government in each state, protects the nation and the people from foreign or domestic violence, and determines how new states can join the Union. It also suggests that all the states are equal to each other and should respect each other's laws and the judicial decisions made by other state court systems. Now, one of the things that's very important with the relation among states is each state shall have access to other states' public records and judicial proceedings. And this is one of the things that's very important, that the states have access to all the different things with the different states, because we're all one. Out of the many come one, right? Congress will regulate these records and access. And so the Congress has a really good or a really important job of protecting the states, but also enabling and allowing states to see records. Also, with relations among states, citizenship. Citizens of each state are entitled to the same privileges as citizens of every state. Extradition. A person charged in any state who flees from justice to another state must be returned to that state. Admission. New states may be admitted into the Union by Congress, but not within the jurisdiction of another state or two states combining without consent of all involved. That's why territories, people can't just change the lines or the boundaries or the borders of our states. Actually, it has to, the Congress will not allow this. It has to go through certain acts, which would be very, very, very difficult. And so they may be admitted into the Union. If we look at states like Alaska, which was much later on in the founding of this great nation, making us 50 states, that's one of the things that Congress will oversee, but not within the jurisdiction of another state or two states combining with consent of all involved. Congressional authority. Congress has the authority and power to regulate all property of the United States. So very strong power with the Congress. Article 5, the amendment process. Future generations can amend the Constitution if the society so requires it. Both the state and Congress have the power to initiate the amendment process. So we have so many amendments within our Constitution. And the reason that we have so many of those amendments, because things change over time, and so do the laws, and the laws need to change as people change. And because of that, these amendments help tweak, I guess is the best word, some of the articles that might be more vague in their language. And what the amendments do is kind of put more detail to what is so vague. And so that's what's happening. Now, here's how we can read this. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall redeem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution. And so I'm going to lay it out in an illustration here in just a moment, so you'll get to see how does this really happen. But that 2/3 number is very important when thinking about how things are proposed, and then of course when they become ratified. Or 2/3 of the state legislators can call a convention. So the Congress, 2/3, can bring forth a proposal, or 2/3 of the state legislators call a convention, actually bring a proposal. Either case, 3/4 of the state's legislature is needed to pass it or for it to be ratified. This is the illustration I was telling you about. There's 4 different avenues to go that an amendment can go through. And so the first one would simply be proposed by Congress by a 2/3 vote in both houses. So that's important. House of Representatives and the Senate, you got to see in those houses there has to be a 2/3 vote in both houses. Then going past that, or you go just straight down, you see also another way of proposing. It proposes a national convention, at a national convention called by Congress when requested by 2/3 or 34 of the state legislatures. And so this is important when we think about how it's proposed. Now, going from there, it's going to go to the ratification process, and that's step 2. We see that at the top right, ratified by the state legislatures of 3/4, which is 38, for 38 of the states. And so you kind of see that there, or kind of skipping down below that, ratified by conventions held in 3/4, 38 of the states. And so there's a couple different avenues to go to get an amendment approved or ratified, but this is the process that you have to go through. All right, Article 6, National Debts, National Supremacy, Oaths of Office. This article determines that the U.S. Constitution and all laws made from it are the supreme law of the land, and all officials, whether members of the state legislatures, Congress, judiciary, or the executive, have to swear an oath to the Constitution. And as when they're doing these types of things, there can be no comments or there's no questions that are brought in that deal with religious affiliation. And so that's where we've talked about before, that we are a free country and you have freedom to express your religion as long as it doesn't hurt somebody or cause some kind of pain to somebody. There can be no questions asked about that. And so this is what Congress is. It's expected of Congress and those who are in judiciary or executive branches, what they are to do, and that they need to lift up the Constitution and they need to serve America as a nation. And then Article 7, requirements for ratification, the final article of the Constitution. This article explains how many states are needed to ratify the Constitution. The article details all those people who signed the Constitution representing the original 13 states. And of course, to get the Constitution through, there had to be 9 states that actually got it through, 9 colonies or 9 states that actually got it through, and that's how they got it through. And what we need is there to be more bipartisanship to do things, and that is needed for ratification. And so I thought this was a kind of a great ending for this presidential handshake. We need more bipartisanship. And this picture of course, one man, Barack Obama, who was our president, President Barack Obama. He was a Democrat, and we have President Donald Trump, who is a Republican, professing Republican, and so we have these two people there shaking hands at this moment. It might just be for the camera, but it's important for us to see they're coming across the table in a sense to show kindness toward one another. But this needs to be seen in policies, it needs to be seen in laws, and that's what the Constitution really is aimed at and pushing us toward. Okay. All right, well, that's the end of part 3 of the Constitution of the United States. Good to be with you today. We'll be praying for you. Have a great rest of the day, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.